Welcome to today's webinar, Applied Magic, Interpreting the Magic Quadrant to the Science of Procurement Technology Strategy. My name is Richard Waugh, Vice President Corporate Development at Zycus, and I'll be your host for the webinar today, in which we delve into Gartner Magic Quadrant, in this case specifically for Strategic Sourcing Suites, which is a brand new report just published only days ago on February the 8th, so brand new information. And as I go through the content today, please feel free to type any of the questions you may have in the Q&A chat dialog box. I'll do my best to get to as many of those questions as I can. So before I get into the agenda for today, first of all, just the context about Zycus. Zycus, we are an integrated suite provider of source-to-pay solutions. And those are bifurcated between the more strategic or upstream aspect of the sourcing process, covering areas like spend analytics, strategic sourcing, contract and supplier management. And we also have the downstream or operational procure-to-pay capabilities in requisition, order processing, catalog management, and invoice management and accounts payable automation. Today we will focus on those upstream strategic aspects in gold, if you will, because that is the focus of Gartner Magic Quadrant that's just been published. So a little bit of background about me as well. One of my duties does include analyst relations, which Gartner is certainly a leading analyst in the sourcing and procurement technology space, and background includes some time as an analyst as well. So without further ado, with you the agenda for today, and with you the results right up front. You know, when you talk about Magic Quadrant for strategic sourcing suites, I'm all choked up here, but it really is sort of for providers in the space, such as Zycus, sort of our version of the Oscars. So just 2 nights ago, they handed out the Oscars and the ceremonies. So while I'll analogize the Magic Quadrant to the Oscars, unlike the Oscar ceremonies, number one, we won't keep you waiting to learn who the winners are. You see the quadrant plotted right here. End of page. There won't be any long acceptance speech, although we're quite proud of our position as Zycus at the top of the leaders quadrant. And also, unlike the Oscar ceremonies of a couple nights ago, there won't be any mistakes with the wrong envelope for Best Picture. These are the actual results we're sharing today. And my focus today is really to get behind the graph here, the plot, and sort of delve into how the magic is made, you know, behind the curtain, if you will, and how to really interpret the analysis and how you can apply the magic to the task at hand for most of you, which is making an informed technology selection decision. So the agenda that I have in mind in order to accomplish those goals, we'll start with the process, really understanding the methodology, cover the scope. You know, solutions specifically are included, criteria, and that means inclusion criteria for which vendors satisfy those criteria to make the cut, so to speak. You know, following the movie analogy a little bit further, and also the evaluation criteria on what dimensions are the various vendors that you see here assessed. A Magic Quadrant process. I'll go into more detailed definitions of the solutions themselves and to highlight some of the key findings that the Gartner provide in their report, the insights and the takeaways, and talk about really how to apply this to your particular needs and share some feedback from customers that have either participated in this process as references or that have utilized the report going through their own solution evaluation and selection process And finally, I'll focus a little bit more specifically on Zycus's position, what allowed us to achieve this position at the top of the leaders quadrant that's so meaningful and gratifying, quite frankly, for us. With that in mind, I'm going to start with the methodology, and it is quite a rigorous, methodical process. So in total, this process really started April of 2016 with the report just being published February 8th of 2017, so nearly a full year in the making as we go through the various steps, and you see multiple milestones that start with Gartner reaching out, asking of information from the vendors responding, also engaging multiple customer references, going through a draft review and a fact review process before the final publication. So I'd just like to highlight from the vendor standpoint or perspective some of the key activities are, and it really starts with the vendor survey, which is really a battery of hundreds of questions that the participating vendor is asked to respond to across multiple dimensions. So that's information about the company, about our products, what features and capabilities we have, who our customers are, how we deliver those capabilities in terms of platform, as well as some key metrics around how the applications are being used, what the adoption rates have been. That's supported as well by detailed company financials, so that Gartner wants to measure not just the capabilities in terms of the solutions themselves, but the viability of the providers. And that's followed up by analyst briefings. So taking the lead analysts on the report through a detailed briefing about the company's strategy and direction, areas of innovation and differentiation, as well as global market coverage and support capabilities. In addition, I think one of the things that lends so much credibility to the Gartner Magic Quadrant report and process is the heavy reliance on customer references throughout this process. So, for example, at Zycus, we submitted more than a dozen customer references that would then go through either surveys or an interview process, which they're asked detailed questions about exactly what are they using, how are they using it, how well are they being supported, are they getting value from those, and perhaps my favorite question is, if you had to do it all over again, would you buy again from a particular vendor? So a lot of emphasis on the customer experience, which makes the results so meaningful to end users. So we get into the report. I'll just kind of cover the synopsis first. As I said, just published on February the 8th. The authors are those key Gartner analysts. Maybe many of you are already familiar with their names: Magnus Berfors, Debbie Wilson, Desiree Edwards. Right up front here, they've identified a couple key trends in the market for strategic sourcing application suites. One is the focus on an integrated suite. And throughout the report, or later in the report, it's been that it's not only about an integrated suite for strategic sourcing tools, but also increasingly an integrated suite that includes procure-to-pay to create an end-to-end source-to-settle or source-to-pay capability. In addition, at a high level, strategic sourcing application suites are related and integrated solutions that support those upstream or more strategic aspects of procurement, such as planning, assessment, and performance management. So it does not include, by definition, the operational or downstream procurement per pay. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about what it does include. And at its core, the Magic Quadrant addresses four sort of fundamental modules that comprise the strategic sourcing suite. So it starts with spend analysis. So spend analysis is something that most organizations are doing in some way, shape, or fashion and have done for a long time, but oftentimes that may be done through a variety of more manual efforts and Excel spreadsheets and those kinds of things. Here, by definition, spend analysis is an automated process, cleansing, enhancing, and classifying spend data that enables procurement and sourcing teams to really identify opportunities for cost reduction or supplier rationalization, really leveraging those analytics to form the basis for their category and sourcing strategies that ensue from there. The second component is e-sourcing. So this well is an RFX automation, so RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. Here in the definition, online auctions are not specifically mentioned, but would be part of this process as well. And the other qualifier that's included here really makes clear that the focus is on projects, sourcing projects that would result in long-term agreements. So we're not really talking about a transactional spot buy type of sourcing engagement, but a full sourcing project that can include some very complex projects. So mentioned here is the fact that solutions in this category enable large-scale complex bids that might consist of dozens of line items and perhaps hundreds of suppliers and result in award decisions across multiple suppliers. So it includes optimization, allocation, back-end bid award decision-making process. The third component is contract management. Really, two different capabilities are mentioned. The first being a searchable enterprise-wide repository that uses metadata tags around key contract or terms such as the supplier or the contract value or expiration date. And it also mentions that some of the suites can support authoring and negotiation. So contract creation from templates or clause libraries, pre-negotiation or pre-signature approval workflows, version control, utilization or burn rate tracking, change orders, and up to and including digital signatures at the actual contract binding or finalization step. And the fourth and final core component for the strategic sourcing suite quadrant evaluation here is supply-based management. So really the core capability here is a supplier portal that enables self-service supplier provisioning of key data, such as mentioned here, contact information, insurance certificates, locations, could also include quality certifications or process capabilities, those kinds of things. And the ability then to integrate the self-service information provided through the portal interface with other data sources, be they third-party or internal data sources. So it forms a virtual supplier master, and may either be a standalone or may be synchronized with the ERP's supplier master as well. From a definition standpoint, those are the core models that form the basis of this evaluation. Now let's talk about who gets included, received the nomination for these Oscars and what the inclusion and exclusion criteria would be. So at the starting point, the providers must own, market, and sell those four core modules for spend analysis, e-sourcing, management, and supply-based management. So that means they're not resellers of someone else's. They in fact own their own software and market and sell that themselves directly, and cover each of those from a software capability standpoint. The one caveat mentioned here is in the spend analysis space, the vendor may actually outsource the back-end data management as long as they have the front-end user interface and business intelligence or analytics that support that application. Of course, the thing they're really looking at is market traction. So in the most recent period prior to the of this reporting cycle for the Magic Quadrant, which would be calendar year 2015, to meet minimum inclusion criteria, a vendor would have had to have had at least $12 million in software revenues, so not services, but software, subscription, license, or maintenance revenues across the strategic sourcing suite in calendar year 2015. And not only that they have a critical mass of call them enterprise clients. So recent wins in the current period calendar year 2015 with it bring at least 5 new logos with large enterprises, $1 billion or more in revenues, and also a critical mass of those enterprise clients. So a minimum of 30 cumulative clients with revenues in excess of $1 billion. So in respects, I would say this is kind of reflective of certainly Gartner's core constituency and customer base, which would tend to be larger enterprises. So they want to make sure that the providers can support organizations of scale. In addition, they're looking to see that the providers can scale on a global basis. So geographic coverage is important as well. So the providers must have a minimum of 20% of 2015 revenues from customers that are headquartered in different from the vendor's home office. Vendor has to have offices and actual presence in 2 or more continents to be considered for inclusion in the Magic Quadrant process. So that's who gets in. The evaluation criteria, very important here because there are 2 criteria, two key axes on that quadrant, which don't worry, I'll be showing you that graphic repeatedly as we go throughout here. But the first, the x-axis, the ability to execute. And here, Gartner says that vendors are evaluated on products, processes, systems, methods, and procedures in order to achieve competitiveness, efficiency, and effectiveness. I mentioned this is a qualitative assessment, but I would say there's a lot of quantitative data coming from the survey input, not only from the vendors themselves, but I think more importantly from the reference customers that respond to the surveys and interviews as well. So what is it that's weighted in this area? When we look at what's weighted, products and services, the core capabilities to deliver the functionality across the sourcing suite comes to the fore, as the customer experience. As Gartner mentions here, the bottom line is, has a vendor delighted its customers and helped them achieve their goals? That's equally as important as features and functions, certainly. Actually, from a meeting standpoint, the other category that they weigh highly in the ability to execute dimension would be market execution, because as is pointed out here, the vendors must be visible enough, have enough of an established brand presence to be able to continue to build market share, which would be evidence of their ability to execute. Now, some other factors that go in, not rated as highly but still important: overall viability, things like financial strength, business model in terms of the pricing model, how effectively the vendor executes from a sales standpoint, how responsive they are from a marketing standpoint, operations, their ability to support customers effectively as well. So a number of key criteria across this most critical dimension, ability to execute. Key here, the y-axis, if you will, the completeness vision. So whereas ability to execute is more in the here and now, stand today, the completeness of vision is a little bit more forward-looking, going in the future. And, what is the vision for the evolution of the market? Not only that you understand the current market trends, but are really able to out and peer out into the future and kind of predict what customers are going to be needing. And here, the key criteria that are weighted most heavily are certainly product strategy, more of that roadmap, what innovations are coming down the pike, and geographic strategy, how well you're covering the globe from a region standpoint, from a vertical market standpoint as well. Those are the most highly rated criteria when it comes to completeness of vision. Market understanding is important, vertical markets, as I mentioned, important as well. Other things that are looked at but not factored into the rating would include sales and marketing strategies, business model, examples. So those are really the two key evaluation criteria that are then used along with all the data that's aggregated throughout the surveying and the briefing and the interviewing process that I mentioned at the outset, to then be able to plot the various vendors across the 4 different quadrants. And next I'm going to explain a little bit more about what those quadrants mean and interpret results of where vendors are placed as regards the various quadrants. So let's start at the most exclusive neighborhood, the upper right-hand quadrant, which is leaders, and this is where Zycus appears. Some of the keys here is I won't read the definition to you, but Gartner really says that these are the providers, the leaders, that are defining the technology market. It's a yardstick against which other providers are measuring themselves. And the reason leaders is they've demonstrated results in terms of market growth and, at least as important, customer satisfaction. In addition, Gartner says these are providers that scale across the globe, that support all over the world and are not a single vertical market player. They span industry segments as well. So especially for those larger enterprises that I mentioned earlier, $1 billion and more in revenue, they're likely to be on a global scale and scope. So they're certainly looking for providers that have those capabilities. The other characteristic that's really critical that's mentioned here for the leaders quadrant is that they have the staying power. So as Gartner mentions, they're the ones most likely to be here 5 years from now. So, typical in this space that most agreements for strategic sourcing suites tend to be 3 to 5 years in length. This would be really a critical criteria as well, that you're making a bet on the future and that the vendors, certainly those in the leaders quadrant, be shown to have the staying power. Those that Gartner fully expects are most likely to be 5 years hence. Leaders quadrant. Let's talk next about the upper left-hand quadrant, which is challengers. Gartner defines it, the challengers proven their ability to meet those minimum technical requirements, in some cases exceed customer expectations on functionality, but they do say that challengers need to focus on innovation, product strategies, and also be able to expand their footprint geographically in order to make a move from the challengers into another quadrant such as leaders. Now talk about visionaries, so the bottom right-hand quadrant. So in the visionaries category, providers are focused on innovation, anticipating the market needs, and harnessing the nexus of forces, as Gartner calls it, mobile, social, cloud, and big data. to anticipate those market needs. However, Gartner does say that those providers in the Visionaries quadrant face challenges delivering to the global market. So when it comes to ability to execute, certainly and lower on that particular axis because of specific challenges or noted challenges and be able to deliver solutions effectively to the global market. Final quadrant, the bottom lower left-hand quadrant, would be niche players. So Gartner mentions they do offer strategic sourcing suites, but clearly the implication is they're not as robust. The quote here is that they lack some functional components. So often the niche player would be targeted at a specific vertical or limited by geographical constraints or only certain spend categories, as an example. Now, Gartner mentions, it's important to match your specific requirements to the per capability. So for some company may have a narrower set of requirements, either for a geography, spend category, a vertical market. As an example, they may find very good solutions in each category, as an example. A bit of context then. This was the most recent update to the Magic Quadrant report for strategic sourcing suite vendors that was published in February 2015. So almost exactly 2 years in between publications. So what's happened in the 2 years? Gartner does give us a little bit of context to help understand what some of the latest trends are in the market. And certainly they've highlighted the fact that within the last 2 years, the suite providers have really completely displaced ERPs. It mentions none of the providers included in this iteration, the Magic Quadrant, is a native ERP. And I mentioned here they're just not seen as competitive solutions. So what makes suites solution, the preferred solution of buyers out there, what makes them, the suite providers, the most competitive? I think hit on the key aspects here. Lower total cost of ownership, faster time to value, also more rapid innovation, keeping providers best of breed, if you will, on the leading edge and distancing themselves from other solutions such as ERPs, and a more flexible architecture built for knowledge sharing and collaboration. I think all are valid arguments for the suite provider or best of breed approach. The other thing that's interesting here that Gartner notes that in the last couple of years, the usage of suites has moved well beyond, managing those core transactions that occur in the sourcing process, be they the RFX or the contracts that result from a sourcing project. And Gartner identifies the fact that not only are more deploying integrated suites, but realizing new benefits that emanate from having that kind of end-to-end process transparency. So specifically, they mention that these reference clients are utilizing the suite capabilities to more effectively monitor and mitigate supply risk, to track savings on a holistic life cycle basis, to fuse their category management process with knowledge sharing and being able to reuse intelligence and information and incorporate analytics throughout. So encouraging developments just in the last couple of years from the prior iteration of the Magic Quadrant report as to how organizations are taking forward the capabilities of the integrated suites. So a little bit more context around the market itself. Gartner mentions that when they looked at the various reference clients submitted by the providers included in this process that the use is primarily by large enterprises, at least companies with 800 million or in annual revenues. But certainly there are exceptions, and there's growing adoption within, let's say, a mid-market segment as well. That may be due in some cases by regulatory requirements. I mentioned here the European Union public sector requirements to adopt e-sourcing tools, or industry pressures driving cost reductions. I think another aspect at play here is with the prevalence and really predominance of the cloud delivery model, it made these solutions more accessible to mid-market. So it's not just for enterprises that the wherewithal to take these investments, but also it's, with the advent of cloud solutions and more subscription-based price models as an example, it's making these capabilities more accessible and more reachable for mid-market companies as well. And Gartner does mention they expect to see dramatic growth in that segment. The interesting aspect that's mentioned here is that while the minimum inclusion criteria were those 4 core modules, spend analytics, e-sourcing, content management, and supply-based management, many of the providers in the space have gone above and beyond those modules to also include abilities for project management, for category management, or financial savings management and tracking, as well as supplier networks. And most are also now offering procure pay suites as part of an integrated source settle or to pay capability. The other thing is significant here is the coverage and utility that these suites are providing customers, in that Gartner mentions this is typically deployed as a shared service. Certainly most cases these are cloud-based. As a shared service, they're enabling organizations to cover all spend categories, direct and indirect, all different business units across the enterprise. So broad market applications and coverage at play here. I want to drill into some of the other key findings that Gartner's highlighted in the report itself. Number one, they list the top 3 reasons that organizations are investing in a strategic sourcing suite. So it starts with a desire to transform strategic sourcing within the organization. Comes the goal of increasing productivity, followed closely by the proverbial goal of finding ways to continually deliver increased cost savings. And earlier, there's a strong trend towards suites, and users are certainly looking for synergies on an intra-suite basis and stronger integration within a suite. Now, not everyone is happy yet. Gartner mentions that 10% of client references still say they're not getting value from multiple modules from the same vendor. But I would really accentuate the fact that greater than 4 to 1, 41% getting excellent value from the integrated suite versus the 10% that say they're not yet seeing that value. Certainly a silver lining there that says that most or significantly more are realizing that value, those synergies from having an integrated suite across those sourcing functions. The other thing that highlighted here in the findings is the fact that there's widespread of these tools across all spend categories. So, a long time organizations may have focused more with the strategic sourcing suite solutions or a best-of-breed tool on indirect, especially since ERPs sort of had built the core capabilities around direct materials, but significant here, direct is the highest at the 9%. Just 2/3 say they're using suite tools to manage complex services, and nearly 60% for direct material parts or inventoried components as well. So clearly, in the most cases, the vast majority are finding ways to effectively leverage the suite across all categories of spend, direct, indirect, services, capital included. So that's certainly encouraging as well. Now, Gartner mentioned that although these tools have recognized sort of mainstream or become widespread in use, there's still room for improvement when it comes to adoption. All providers that were included in the Magic Quadrant process, those client references, just about 50%, still run less than 100 sourcing events annually. So certainly there would be opportunity for additional adoption, higher volumes, higher throughput as organizations deploy the tools more broadly and get more value and utility as a result of doing so. The other thing that's highlighted here is that still the 50% are running the strategic sourcing suite standalone, meaning without integration to any other systems. I guess that's good news or bad news. Is that they're clearly getting value without having to invest the time or effort to integrate those tools to other systems. Nevertheless, great 1/3 have integrated sourcing suites to core ERP, and 17% with third-party data sources. Example mentioned here, Dun & Bradstreet, to get financial or credit risk information or establish parent-child relationships. Example there. Just 9% have integrated the sourcing suite with Procure-to-Pay. As Gartner mentions here, this is certainly an area where we can expect there's going to be more additional focus in the coming months and years as organizations look to extend the ability that they've gained by having an end-to-end sourcing suite all the way through to source to pay or source to settle. The other thing that's highlighted here from the finding standpoint is that there's still additional upside for growth in terms of geographic expansion, as well as expansion in terms of the number of functional modules that are deployed. So Gartner assesses that just about a little less than 20% are fully deployed so far, and that about 45% have plans to add additional modules. So there's room, there's upside for growth by adding additional modules within the suite. They have plans to do so. About a third or greater than a third plan for excuse me. And further geographic expansion. So, talk about sort of recommended ways that you as end users of research can get the most out of it, can apply it to your particular needs, and certainly from Gartner. They mentioned that the Magic Quadrant helps you certainly get quick educated. A great starting point as a primer to learn more about the market, who the providers are, what their abilities are, and that if you're initiating a vendor evaluation or selection process, really understand in much more depth how the providers are competitively positioned, strategies they have to execute in the market, and then really be able to compare and contrast by matching your requirements to the various providers' strengths and weaknesses, or strengths and challenges mentioned in the Magic Quadrant report itself. So just as a helpful checklist, I would say certainly this is a great place to learn about the key market trends. The Gartner Magic Quadrant could also be effectively utilized to really develop a set of criteria. Are you focused on all four of those core modules, spend analytics, e-sourcing, contract, and supply-based management, or those additional capabilities as well, project management, category management, as examples, as a way to develop your key criteria for P. If you intend to go to market to evaluate and select providers. Certainly, this would be a great place to look based on your needs and where the various vendors are positioned with the Magic Quadrant. Who should be on your RFP shortlist? Because I think there may be 14 or so in total here. That's probably not practical for an RFP process. So how are you going to go about deciding who are the 3 or 5 or whatever number you arrive at that you want to include on your RFP shortlist? Other recommendation certainly is that this can be an effective tool to perform your due diligence. That's not only by consuming the report itself. I know many of the organizations that are for today's webinar may actually be holders, licensees of Gartner, even if it's not, let's say, in your procurement function. I'm aware that there are many organizations that may have the IT function that actually holds a license. Well, if you have a license, you can actually request entry with the Gartner analyst so that you can, answers to your specific questions from those very knowledgeable resources about, go through your due diligence process and make the right selections in terms of, selecting the technology vendors that best meet your particular needs. And that, last but not least, is utilize the credibility of the Gartner Magic Quadrant as a way to support your selection decision. So in some cases that may mean really being able to get some air cover with key executives, the C-suite, as well as IT, which you view Gartner as the go-to source in many cases for the information, understanding technology markets. So a variety of ways to utilize the Gartner Magic Quadrant process. I thought I'd also share a little customer feedback from Zycus clients that have either participated in this process as references or as consumers Magic Quadrant report information. One mentioned, for example, going through the vendor evaluation and selection process, utilizing the report throughout. At the very last stage, when they go forward their vendor recommendation, the fact that the Quadrant report was sitting on the desk of the president helped establish credibility for their recommended solution provider and help get the project funded and approved. I mentioned, this was their starting point. We created our initial vendor shortlist based on the leaders quadrant of the report itself. Another responded that having been through the reference, type process, that they feel that the process is objective because it relies so heavily on the actual customer reference. I want to accentuate and a little bit more specifically about Zycus's position, we're certainly very proud of being positioned at the top of that leaders quadrant. And how do we get there? I think all these are key criteria and attributes. That it starts with those customer references, that they provide a level of customer satisfaction, that they recognize value from an investment, that they make the same decision if they had it to do all over again. I think there is really consistency throughout. Again, we're talking about a suite of integrated tools, so it really wouldn't serve the customer's purposes very effectively if one module, if this were more a pseudo suite where it's really one strong module and some weak sisters cobbled alongside that. I think one of the things that differentiates Zycus here is the consistent scores across all 4 core modules, from spend analytics, e-sourcing, life cycle management, and supply base management. And not only that the software capabilities are robust, but a strong combination of functionality and platform capabilities, so meaning the ability to deliver and support those capabilities that drives customer success that comes from the results. And, as mentioned, really of the position being in a leaders quadrant, that as compared to other vendors in the space, that there's a brand equity there, that those product offerings are highly thought of across the market. And there's the vision going forward. There's a strong market understanding and ability to anticipate and respond to and evolve with changing market dynamics and customer requirements. So consistency I mentioned before. So at Zycus, we're proud of the fact not only that we're in 2017, but this is the 3rd consecutive of the Magic Quadrant for strategic sourcing suites where Zycus has been mentioned as a leader. You see it's on kind of a 2-year interval timeline. So the prior reports in 2015, 2013, where Zycus has once again been consistently recognized as a leader. And last but not least, I want to close by make sure that folks that would like to get a free copy of the report know access it. Certainly we're making this available through our website where you can come and download the report. I encourage everyone that's either a buyer of technology or one plans to be in the market, that you plan to go out and evaluate various providers and make a selection, to avail yourself of this resource. This is certainly you can get your free copy of the report by visiting Zycus.com and downloading the report. And also, as I mentioned, if you happen to be a licensee of Gartner's, may make sense to see if you can schedule an inquiry to get insights directly from the source. It's been my pleasure to join you today to hear this brand new content and really go through the magic a little bit. It is called the Magic Quadrant, but really folks to understand the methodology that's involved, what goes into it from the solution provider standpoint, the vendor's perspective, which is certainly ours, and really a few helpful hints on how to utilize the information, what some of the key insights and takeaways are. So thank everyone for joining today, and please feel free to visit us at Zycus.com and download your free copy of our Magic Quadrant report for strategic sourcing vendors. For joining the webinar today, this will conclude broadcast.